In this podcast episode, Lauren Southern, a controversial media figure known for her far-right views and activism, discusses her journey and changing perspectives. She explains that depending on who you ask, she's either seen as a far-right Nazi or a far-left traitor feminist. Southern acknowledges that she was associated with the farther right side of the political spectrum, particularly around 2015-2016. However, she argues that there's been a significant shift in the Overton window since then, with topics she once discussed that were considered extremely controversial now being discussed more openly in mainstream conservative circles. Southern reflects on her early career, where she engaged in on-the-ground reporting and activism. She mentions her work on issues like mass immigration and what she termed the death of the West. She notes that at the time, these topics were far more controversial than they are now, and she faced significant backlash, including bans from countries and placement on watch lists. She argues that if she had waited 5 years to discuss these topics, her reputation would likely be very different. As the conversation progresses, Southern reveals that her personal experiences led her to question and ultimately reject many of the ideologies she previously embraced. She discusses her marriage and subsequent divorce, which she described as a wake-up call regarding the realities of relationships and the flaws in certain right-wing narratives about marriage and gender roles. Southern shares that towards the end of her marriage, she discovered a list in her husband's office containing names of media figures who had written negatively about her. She was told this was a contingency list of people he would contact to damage her reputation if she disobeyed in the marriage. She describes this as abusive behavior and a stark contrast to the idealized version of traditional marriage often promoted in right-wing circles. Southern discusses the concept of the trad wife, traditional wife, and how her attempts to embody this ideal ultimately failed. She explains that many critics argue she wasn't the perfect trad wife because she continued working and didn't marry someone local. However, she counters this by sharing the story of a friend who did everything perfectly according to the trad wife manual, marrying young, having many children, being a stay-at-home mom, only to end up divorced and struggling financially when her husband left her. This experience, along with her own, led Southern to conclude that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for marriage or relationships. She emphasizes that selling it as such can actually make people dig their heels further into bad relationships, as she did, thinking they just needed to try harder to follow the rules. A significant portion of the interview focuses on the disconnect between internet narratives about relationships and life and the realities people face. Southern, born in 1995, described herself as a child of the internet, growing up with various online platforms from a young age. She explains how this led to a fractured existence for her generation, with people getting most of their information about reality from the web and diving deep into various ideological forums. Southern acknowledges that she was naturally attracted to more conservative, right-wing spaces online, partly due to growing up in a more left-wing area with a conservative family. She notes that binary, simplistic solutions to complex problems tend to get more views online than nuanced, thoughtful conversations, which contributed to her embracing certain ideologies. The podcast hosts emphasize the importance of real-world experiences and the danger of taking internet advice too literally, especially for younger generations who may not have other points of reference. They discuss how the internet can create echo chambers and reinforce harmful ideologies, leading to a disconnect from reality. Southern highlights the problem of audience capture in media, where content creators become trapped by the expectations and desires of their audience. She explains that there are financial incentives to appease an audience, whether it's a feminist publication or a red pill space, which can lead to a feedback loop of reinforcing certain narratives rather than presenting more nuanced, balanced views. She admits that it took her years to acknowledge things she had been wrong about or misunderstood in the past, and emphasizes the difficulty of actual growth and change. She argues that there's a financial incentive to keep feeding people misery and simple narratives rather than encouraging genuine personal development. Throughout the interview, Southern stresses the importance of being truthful and authentic, both in personal life and in media. She shares that the physiological effects of lying by omission, such as not discussing her divorce publicly, are significant, causing her stress and even premature graying. Once she publicly shared the truth about her situation, she found herself able to heal and move forward. The hosts reinforce this point, discussing the idea that every time a person does something they know is wrong, with lying being a prime example, they get closer to their personal hell on earth. Conversely, acting in accordance with one's principles and values brings one closer to a personal heaven on earth. Southern and the hosts discuss the toxic nature of much social media interaction, likening some online behavior to demonic influence. They note how people often behave online in ways they never would in person, and how this can have a detrimental effect on mental health and societal discourse. Southern emphasizes the importance of blocking negative influences and not allowing crackheads of the internet to have access to one's psyche. As the interview concludes, Southern reflects on her journey and the lessons she's learned. She expresses gratitude for her current life and emphasizes the importance of choosing reality over internet ideologies. She encourages listeners to make decisions based on what will truly make them and their families happy, rather than trying to live up to the expectations of online groups or ideologies. The hosts note that Southern now has a unique opportunity to reach people and help them realize the importance of balancing online information with real-world experiences. They encourage her to use her platform to share her story and insights, potentially helping others avoid similar pitfalls. In her final comments, Southern highlights the need to address the catastrophe of audience capture in political discourse. She calls for freeing the minds of those leading discourse to speak truthfully about their own lives and reality, rather than feeding into audience expectations. The hosts agree, emphasizing their own approach of deliberately challenging their audience at times to maintain authenticity. The interview concludes with a reflection on the importance of honest conversation and the stress that comes with constantly trying to adhere to talking points. Southern and the hosts agree that living authentically, even if it means potentially earning less money or having a smaller audience, is ultimately more fulfilling and valuable than catering to audience expectations at the expense of truth and personal integrity.